Hey, what's up? This is ACG Alpine here, and the Nikelab ACG Alpine certainly does have its place in the techwear lore. Released at the end of 2016, it really had the perfect storm of factors, from it coming out at the peak season for Nikelab ACG, its most popular, really epitomising the techwear style at the time, having that design input from Errolson Hugh and the aesthetics of an Acronym product, but at a lower price. All that stuff led to a relatively quick sellout time and climbing resale prices that see, even today, this jacket often fetching significantly above its original retail price of £500 or $600. Many consider the Alpine, and the black one in particular, to be one of the techwear jackets. I've owned it since release. It was the first kind of proper jacket of this type that I bought, and yeah, it definitely helped shape my focus on this style of fashion. And since then I've worn it a whole lot, of course, and have also picked up and worn and talked about all kinds of different jackets. All that is going to help us establish how far this really is the ultimate techwear jacket more casual fans believe it to be. Is it worth that high status? Does it have any downsides? In short, is it worth it? First up, let's talk aesthetics. The look of this jacket is one of the big things that brought about its popularity, and there are so many individual elements on this that contribute to that. First up, let's look at the front here, where you've got all kinds of different zips, many of which are asymmetrical in nature, and that immediately differentiates it from any kind of conventional piece of outerwear. That asymmetry is mirrored with the branding. You've got this big ACG print in this reflective finish, which is great for all you high visibility fans, which goes on the chest and onto the left arm. This is both unconventional placement and extremely distinctive. There's no doubt you can spot this from a glance, you can spot this at a distance, and like it or not, you can spot this in half a second while you're scrolling through your Instagram feed, and yeah, that probably does have an impact on its popularity. An untrained eye might not notice the subtleties between different unbranded, high-end technical jackets, but they'll definitely be able to spot the difference between an Alpine and anything else. The super high collar and the protective hood are more elements which immediately make this look futuristic, urban focused, distinctive, a little bit intimidating as well, and even the whole shape of the jacket contributes towards that, with this tapered fit that kind of cuts in at the hips a little bit more whilst allowing a little bit more space at the chest. It's a far more futuristic cut than your standard, slightly shapeless, oversized hiking jacket of old. Collectively, it's ticking a lot of those classic techwear boxes, and it's doing a lot of the things that people like or liked from a jacket of this style. It also helped popularize and bring to a wider streetwear audience the idea that this kind of technical jacket doesn't have to be associated with the outdoors and hiking and stuff like that. It can, in fact, have that far more urban and militaristic edge, and really bringing that Acronym ethos and design language to Nike and the scale that that brand affords. Still today, this looks future focused and distinctly urban in its aesthetic. I think it's still a pretty cool looking jacket. However, it does have its aesthetic downsides. Extended collars, of course, are nice and protective and they look pretty cool. Some people feel that the collar here is extended to the point of ridiculousness. It certainly is very high. It can look a bit kind of tube-like at times. I don't think this is necessarily an issue. It's more in conjunction with the hood that things maybe start getting a little bit messy. With the hood up and the collar fully zipped, it's designed for ultimate weather protection, but it does unfortunately give you the Pingu Noot Noot head in a big way unless you're cinching the hood in at the back too. Is this protection gone too far? Potentially yes. You can of course unzip the collar a little bit, give yourself a bit more breathing room, but then you're losing that nice face concealment that no doubt is a big part of the Alpine's appeal. And when you've got the hood down and the collar up, it can fold up quite nicely and look quite neat, or it can kind of go a bit skew if you have to sort it out a little bit. So if you're not paying attention to that, you could easily be walking around with this weird misshapen hood lump at the back and you not really notice. I would also list that branding as a potential weakness. Simply put, there is a lot on here. You've got that chest text, you've got another chest logo underneath it, you've got a Nike swoosh on the back, you've got text on both of the cuffs. Pretty much every angle that you look, there is some ACG branding on this jacket. On the one hand, I think this is a good example of heavy branding done right in a fairly cohesive way. I think this works with the design of the jacket rather than against it. However, it does still, to an extent, cheapen its look, in that many other luxury or high-end jackets don't really have any branding at all, or at least nowhere near as much as this, because they're letting the actual design and the shape of the jacket do the talking. I also feel like this is a product product of its time to an extent, in that back in 2016, that kind of streetwear, techwear crossover was a bit more in vogue than it is now. That's not to say it feels dated, but yeah, product of its time is probably the best description. I still think it's a good looking jacket overall though, and I think it's interesting to have something that is functional and high performance while still having that very heavy branding, which feels like a little bit of an unusual contrast. But that's certainly not for everyone, nor will it fit everyone's style. One more aesthetic issue, which is probably the worst one in fact. Because of the jacket's shape, the hand pockets tend to buckle and make it look quite bulky around the stomach area, particularly if you're layering under this jacket and filling it out. You can see that in quite a few clips in this video where I'm wearing the Atom AR outdoors and a Uniqlo fleece indoors under the Alpine. For that reason, it tends to look better with the bottom opened out a bit, which stops that happening. And you'll notice many images of this, people either opening the bottom or putting one or both hands in their pockets, because it helps alleviate that issue. Let's look at features though, because this is a super feature-rich jacket and is one of the things that invited those comparisons between Nikelab ACG and Acronym, and the former being a cheaper equivalent to the latter. Many of them are great and I think work well. You've got zipped hand pockets, you've got zipped chest pockets, some of which are fairly sizable. You can easily fit a 500ml bottle of drink in the left chest pocket, which is probably the biggest thing that you're going to need to carry in a jacket. You've got a semi-concealed floating chest pocket too for a little bit of cool concealed storage. You've even got a pretty sizable internal pocket with a headphone hole as well for the 2 or 3 people left in the world still using wired headphones. The left zip track opens the chest pocket from the bottom, and it also opens the collar up from the top. So you've got multiple aesthetic options here if you do want to play around. You can even open the main and the auxiliary zip to give it this kind of bib style, which I suppose is a little bit silly, but at least is another thing that you can mess around with. And there are some button poppers on the inside of this element, so that you can kind of semi-fold this away, so that if you do wear it like this, it's not quite flapping around as much. While we're here, that little soft touch piece of fabric on the inside is the perfect addition for a high collared jacket. Makes a big difference to the comfort level when this is pressed up against your face, and it's going to help stop that Gore-Tex material delaminating as well, because it's not touching your skin directly. The double zip too is one of those things that just adds another option both aesthetically and functionally, because it makes it a bit easier to wear this jacket sitting down or cycling or doing something like that. In fact, the whole build of this feels like it's designed for ease of movement. You've got articulated elbows there, which make this pretty easy to move, and the shape of the main torso with a little bit of extra chest room, but then cutting in more towards the hips, just feels very comfortable to walk and move about in. And how could we forget the jacket sling? A staple of many Acronym products, the Nikelab ACG Alpine brings it to a lower price point and a wider audience with a different backpack style. This has its own upsides and downsides. On the one hand, you can use this to very quickly put the jacket on and off, in fact faster than the crossbody style. However, to do this, you have to equip the jacket sling as you put the jacket on, which is a little bit of a pain, and it's not as comfortable to wear, I feel. So what I tend to do is, when I do need to use the jacket sling, I will just double it up and kind of wear it messenger style almost. So I personally would prefer it had it stuck to the Acronym crossbody variant rather than this backpack thing. I have to say though, the sling construction itself is fairly kind of robust, fairly substantial. I don't feel like this is really going to wear out or break or anything like that, which is more than can be said for some of the other slings that I've tried, which may be a little bit flimsy. Armpit zips are a great feature to have, especially on a Gore-Tex jacket, which is very protective, but not quite as breathable as some other materials. They're not mesh backed or anything either, so they just open up the jacket entirely, which gives you a lot of potential ventilation. They're quite long too. But I think it's maybe the elbow articulation that is partly to blame here, but they're not actually that easy to undo or do up when you're wearing this jacket, which does inhibit their usability a little bit. I've also found that on the left side specifically, if you have this all the way done up, that zip will actually catch against one of the chest pocket zips when you're walking around. So I've actually taken to having the left one slightly undone at all times, which it solves the problem, but it's a little bit strange that you have to do that. Gore-Tex construction though, I found this super reliable from a water resistance perspective. It's never let me down in that department, and the DWR coating has remained over all of this time. I've also not noticed any issues from a durability perspective either. It's got only light signs of wear on the outside over the last 4 years or so, and it's not showing any signs of delamination. Overall, I think the Alpine is pretty well constructed. One thing I'm not 100% sure about though is the exact nature of the material here. My understanding is that it's the standard 3-layer Gore-Tex fabric. That's certainly how it was marketed and sold, and when you buy this you get that classic diamond tag on there that says Gore-Tex, guaranteed to keep you dry, all that stuff. However, I have heard people in the past say that they use Gore-Tex Paclite for this, which is actually a 2.5 layer membrane, which is a little bit lighter weight, but a little bit less protective. Comparing this to my Beta LT, which is definitely the 3-layered Gore-Tex stuff, this does feel a little bit different, although it's hard to say if that's just because this is much older, and they do change their fabric composition from time to time. It could just be kind of more worn, it's been washed, all that kind of thing, which could contribute to it feeling different. It's also kind of hard to tell the weight because of all of the metal hardware that's on this jacket. Whether it's Paclite or not, it's not the lightest jacket in the world. So if anyone has a 100% definitive answer on that, as to whether the Alpine uses the 3-layer stuff or Paclite, that would be great to know. But I've certainly had no issues from a durability or a protection perspective. What I will say though is on many of the Acronym Gore-Tex jackets, they actually use Gore-Tex Pro, which is a higher level, should we say, of Gore-Tex fabric. And I could do an entire video about the different Gore-Tex fabrics, because now there's 3 different kinds of Gore-Tex Pro and this, that and the other. But in short, it'll offer you good performance without necessarily being the absolute pinnacle of Gore-Tex fabrics. If this jacket is up your street, then how might you go about wearing and styling it? When I bought this initially, pretty much the only thing that I had to go with it was my ACG cargo, so I just wore those in a little 2-piece all the time. But you need only go back to 2016 and 2017 and all of those kinds of Techwear outfit pictures to see exactly the kind of way that this has traditionally been worn. It's all black stuff, it's lots of aggressive silhouettes, it's that kind of slimline shape, it's the urban utility kind of vibe. In general, I think this looks better done up. That's where the extended collar is really going to shine, and it means that you can see all that cool branding and pocket detailing as well. Although you could, of course, try wearing this undone if you want to have a more relaxed look and make this look a little bit more like a regular jacket. Even with that though, I think this has a bit less flexibility than many other technical jackets because that branding and that aesthetic does come across so strongly. It just feels like it's too far in that flashy streetwear world to just kind of chuck on with anything when you need a bit of rain protection and call it a day. It's definitely more youthful streetwear kind of thing than a sophisticated urban technical. I do think there's potential to style this with a more kind of outdoor hiker kind of thing. At the end of the day, this is still a performance shell jacket. It is still at home and it will still function well in that world. Although of course pairing this up with a big retro pair of hiker pants is probably going to be a little bit of an odd combination. You definitely have to take that kind of future focused technical hiker kind of vibe rather than that dude that you find on Route 4. However, don't forget there are multiple colours here. They released an olive version at the same time as the black, and then the following year they released 3 different, far more vibrant and patterned variants of the Alpine jacket. So if the more kind of outdoor performance hiker kind of thing is more your vibe, then I think those versions are going to fit far better into that than the black one would. 4 years on, I'm still very much a fan of this jacket. I think it has a lot of the kinds of functionality that I use on a fairly regular basis. I think it looks pretty cool too, and it certainly fits in great with my wardrobe. I personally find this very easy to chuck on and wear. Would I want to buy this now though, knowing that I'd have to probably pay around the $1,000 mark to get one? I'm not so sure. As we talked about, it isn't perfect. It does have its aesthetic and functional downsides, but then, you know, nothing's perfect, right? What doesn't have downsides? But I also feel that a big part of the ACG Alpine's appeal when it released was that it gave you a little bit of a sample of that Acronym style. It gave you a lot of the cool features that the jacket has, and it gives you certainly a nice taste of that overall aesthetic, even though it's in a very different Nikelab form. That advantage doesn't make as much sense when you're having to pay an inflated price for the ACG Alpine. For not too much more, you could certainly start looking at a whole bunch of different used Acronym jackets, and they're going to offer you similar aesthetics and functionality and more. I'd say then you really have to be sold on the specific feature set that the ACG Alpine offers, and that distinctive look with that heavily branded finish that you're not going to find on an Acronym product. It's hard to deny that with the Alpine you're paying partly for the look, partly for the feature set, and partly for the fact that it's got its place in the Techwear canon and that they aren't really available for sale very often. They are iconic to an extent, and yeah, you're paying a premium for that fact. I should mention, of course, the 3 newer colours of the Alpine do tend to command a far lower price when they come up for sale. You're looking much more at the $350, $400 mark. That, of course, is because they do present such a different aesthetic. You are getting quite a lot of features for that price, but you definitely have to make sure that you like it on its own merit and you like that colour and you like the pattern, and you're not just buying it because it's an Alpine. To be honest, the old ones and the new ones are so different aesthetically, one is not really equivalent to the other. The olive one could be a nice middle ground. It tends to go a little bit cheaper than the black one does, but it still boasts that same kind of urban utility aesthetic. It's certainly nowhere near the level of craziness as the 2017 versions. That's quite enough on the Nikelab ACG Alpine jacket. I do think it's pretty cool, but there is so much other stuff out there. You don't need to get too caught up on trying to chase one of those, I don't think. There are plenty of other options. Let me know your thoughts on the ACG Alpine. Are you a massive fan of it? Do you think it's an absolute grail? Or do you think it's a little bit overhyped? Or maybe somewhere kind of in the middle? Either way, let me know what you think. And if you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like, because it is super appreciated as always. And thank you so much for watching, and we will be back next week with another video. Thanks so much for all your comments on last week's video. We had some real good cerebral takes. We got Thomas Steele's in there coming in with a good thoughtful comment. So yeah, thanks so much to everyone who took the time to put your detailed thoughts down there. And thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of the video. If you want to catch some more, there's going to be links going up at the top. And if you haven't subscribed yet, then you should definitely consider doing so, because we've got more videos coming up every single week. So hit the button, be a subscriber friend, and hey, we'll see you next week for that video.